Okay, welcome. We are in week 10, and we'll start building another application. This time we want to connect to the web service. And standard setup, the same setup that we've been using so far. Empty application and empty activity is fine. Main activity as the name, and we start our work. And before it finishes the build, I will fix the style. I will do small changes in the layout. Okay. What I want to do is a simple thing. I have the web service, right? I have this web service. I want to grab one of the users, let's say the first one, and I want to display the name of the user in the text field that I have. Simple task, but it gives you more or less all the steps that we need to follow, right? So here is my output. It has to be named, right? We need ID, name txt will be the ID. I will make it bigger so we can see that it's really working, right? And that's the whole interface that we will have. If you want to make it more fancy or test the whole interaction, what you can do, you can add an input box and a button and do the whole thing on button click, right? The trip to the web service and back with the ID that is given to you by the user, right? We can do that. What I will start with, I will start with doing it on create, right? So we'll do the trip to the web service, grab the data that we need, and display it in one function, right? So this is my starting point. Let's go to the implementation. Now, connecting to the web service means that my application is using internet connection, right? By default, applications don't do that unless they ask for the permission. They ask for the permission in the beginning when you install the application. If there are more intrusive features, you can ask for the permission during the runtime. With the internet, we don't have to do that on runtime. We can simply add user's permission tag to the manifest file. And we want to add the permission called internet. We are adding this tag right after or next to the application tag in the manifest. Can you see the code well, or I should dim the lights? And so we have the permissions. save this, and we can close the file. We'll be using our text view as our output, right? txt name. So let's get the reference to it. Get, so not get, find. Find view by ID, R, ID, name txt. You noticed that Android doesn't like long-running tasks being executed on a UI thread, right? And connecting to the web service is also potentially a long-running task. So what we do in such case, we use asynchronous task. We try to execute the action in the background. We'll do the same thing here. Your first encounter with asynchronous task was the previous lab when we've been running the database queries using asynchronous tasks. We'll do it in a similar way today. So we'll use async task. Async task. This time, we'll use directly the function execute. And the parameter to this function is instance of a runnable. New runnable. This is a new background task. The first thing that we have to define is the address that we want to connect to, right? So URL parameter to this constructor is the address, the URL that we want to open. And in my case, it will be this. HTTPS JSON placeholder dot cpcode.com/users/1. It's red because this function throws an exception if this is not correct URL. What we can do, we can add we can surround this thing with try catch. Now, our next step will be opening the connection. We'll use the class HTTPS URL connection. And we'll ask the object URL to open the connection. We need to cast the return value, and we need to catch the exceptions. And so that's the final code. This object, my connection, allows us to do many different things. First, we can define the method that we want to use. So we can define if it's a post or get, something else. We can set headers for the request, like HTTP headers. And that may be quite useful, especially if your web service requires authentication. That's how you pass the parameters in most cases. If it's GET, you can also set request properties. You can set the parameters, and you can pass the data. If it's a POST request, you can add data to the request. Right? In our case, it's a GET request, not guest, but GET request. So we don't have to do all that, right? Everything really is here, right? In the URL. So what we have to do right now, we have to check if our request was successful. My connection get response code. If this is equal to 200, we are happy owners of an open connection. If it's something else, what we can do, we can log the information that there was a problem, right? Connection error, and we can say my connection dot get response message will tell us what was wrong. Now what we have to do, we have to parse the information, right? We have to first receive the information that is there and then parse it. We get the information from the input stream. Input stream is equal to my connection get input stream. We know that this response is a text, so we'll use the input stream reader, process that, and we'll create new input stream reader. It takes two parameters. First one is the stream that will be processed. The second one, that is optional, is the encoding. If my response is a plain text, I would just use the input stream reader to get this text. I know that my response is JSON. So what I want to do, I want to use a JSON reader to process that. Input stream reader. And this extra step will allow me to parse it without really putting much thinking into how to do it, right? Myself. Now, with JSON, you have to know what kind of response you get. Is it an object or is it an array? Because you have different methods to process them. In our case, we take a look at this response. it will be an object, right? Object contains some properties, right? If you would grab all the users, it would be an array. Right? Since we are getting only one, it's an object. So, JSON reader begin object. It will start the processing of the input and treating the input as an object. An object is a list of properties, pairs, right? The name and the value. So we'll use a loop. JSON reader until it has next. For as long as it has next, we'll do the processing. And we'll take the key. Next name is giving us the name of the parameter, basically processing it line by line. And we'll check if this if this key is equal to name, means that we found the value that we want to display, right? So we'll grab it. String name is equal to JSON reader next string. You notice that you have a bunch of options here, right? Booleans, names, longs, and so on, right? Now what I want to do next, I'll just leave a comment here. I want to update UI, right? And I will get back to this place in a second. We can do break. We can finish the execution, right? If it's something else, right? If it's not name, I'm not interested in this value, so I will say JSON reader dot skip value. In both cases, after I'm done with processing, so after the loop finishes, I should close the JSON reader, and after the if statement, I should also close my connection, disconnect. And you want to release any handlers that you have, right? Any connections, resources, and so on. Now, this is running in a separate thread, right? So we are kind of disconnected from the user interface. Depending on the version of SDK and device and many other things, you may be able to do this and say txt name dot set text name. May work. If I try to run it right now, probably it will. And it does, right? Oh, that's from yesterday. But it will refresh, and you will see that it's working. But in some cases, Android doesn't like that. Doesn't like when you run code that is in a separate thread, and this code is trying to update UI. What you have to do in that case, installing, what you have to do in such case, you see that this is the name that we got. You have to kind of go back to the UI thread with the information that you want. There is a function run on UI thread. This function takes a runnable, and what you can do, you can take this thing, and you can put it back. This parameter, the name has to be final. And we will be able to run it in the new runnable. We are having one runnable that is pushing things into the background, running in a separate thread. And from that point, we are getting another runnable that is going back to the UI thread to update UI. You can see that it doesn't change much. It works exactly the same way, right? Now, this is not a fully functional application, right? What you should do if you want to use web service like that, you have to build your own data layer, right? So you should have your model that will be representing the user object and other objects that you grab from the web service. You should have this separation between your activities and the data layer, because that's the data layer, right? You should build a class that would be acting in a similar way that the database helper was acting, right? Separating the database logic from your application. And what should be exchanged between these two layers are models, are objects, right, of classes that you create, that you define. What I wanted to show you here, that's why I'm not building it, the whole thing from the bottom up. I just wanted to show you how you can connect to the web services, grab the information from the web service, right? Now, if you want to have some fun with that, you can use the web service and build, let's say, a to-do application that is grabbing the information from outside, right? We started doing that with a database. You can replace a database with a web service and grab items to be displayed from the web service for a specific user. And just reviewing it one more time. If you want to use something that requires the internet connection, you should have this permission added to your Android manifest. And this is mostly for older SDKs, older devices, right? Then in your classes, you create the task, the asynchronous task that is executed. This task open the URL, well, defines the URL that will be connected, opens the connection. After this object is created, we can set up other information that we need for the connection, right? So we can set some, we can set the request method. We can set up parameters for our request, right? Request properties and so on. So that's the next step. If it's a GET request and it does not require any authentication, then you're ready to go. You check if the connection is open, and you verify the response code, and you can start processing the data, right? So it's fairly simple procedure. If your web service is not talking using JSON, but it is using XML, there are also classes like XML reader from Saks that can help you with processing XML the same way, right? In most cases, these two options really cover everything that you need to communicate with the web service. All right. So that's it in terms of the implementation for today. What we'll do right now, we'll talk about the project. So I will stop the recording.